The rain came without warning and without hurry, a fine mist that turned Maple Avenue into a ribbon of dull silver and made the last of August's heat feel like someone had draped a warm towel over the town and forgotten it there. Lena Morrell stood on the porch of her small blue rental with a towel in one hand and a plastic dinosaur in the other, listening to the soft tick of water off the eaves and the quiet inside her chest that came only when her son was finally asleep. The quiet was fragile. It always had been, ever since the year everything split, and she learned to pack her days with the hard work of staying afloat: breakfast at 7, daycare at 8, the clinic from 9 to 5, dinner by 6, bath by 7, story by 8, then bills under a lamp whose switch clicked too loud for comfort. She had made peace with survival by measuring it in small victories: a tire changed without swearing, a rent check mailed before the penalty date, a laugh from her 5-year-old that sounded like a bell she could ring whenever the world felt too heavy to lift. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The dinosaur, a green stegosaurus with a chipped tail, belonged to Milo, who had fallen asleep hugging a pillow fort and a book about constellations. He wanted to learn the names of stars, he'd told her in the store, in the solemn way children claimed futures for themselves. Lena tucked the toy under her arm and glanced at the last glow of dusk behind the clouds. The street was a watercolor, porch lights and soft halos, a pair of teenagers trudging past on their way to the corner store. The world shrunk to the size of their phones. The scream didn't sound like a scream at first. It lifted from the space between the houses in a sound more like a yelp, like a fox striking an unseen fence, a sharp sound that made Lena's shoulders tense and her mind flicker with 100 unhelpful explanations. The second sound left no room for doubting, a strangled no followed by the shatter of glass and the thud of something heavy hitting a wall. Lena was already moving when her brain caught up to her legs. The dinosaur thumped onto the wicker chair as she stepped off the porch and onto the slick concrete of the path, the towel trailing behind her like a flag that had lost its wind. The sound had come from the gray bungalow 2 doors down, the one with the leaning mailbox and the satellite dish rusting into the roofline. Rumors wrapped that house like ivy. People said the man there rode with a club, that sometimes in the night the low thunder of pipes rolled down Maple like a storm that chose not to rain. People said keep your head down, keep your business, keep your mouth closed because you never knew who belonged to who. She didn't speed up. She didn't slow down. She took the path the way she always had, eyes level, gait even, while her mind scrolled through a checklist she had learned in the 2 years she'd worked at the clinic and the 5 years she'd lived in her own skin alone. Don't escalate. Don't be a hero. But also, don't pretend you didn't hear. A porch light at the gray house flicked on. The door banged open. A woman stumbled out, barefoot, one arm wrapped around her ribs, hair matted in a way that told its own story. She saw Lena like a swimmer sees shore. "Help," the woman said, and the word cracked. Lena reached her in 3 strides. "I've got you," she said, and the words came out calm because Lena had learned that calm was a rope thrown across a chasm. Up close, the world sharpened, the woman's split lip, the swelling around one eye, the tremor in her hand that wasn't from the rain. The porch light framed her in harsh yellow, and behind her, the house breathed a different light, bluish, the cold glow of a television. Somewhere inside, a man's voice rumbled like a dog behind a fence. "Can you walk?" Lena asked, keeping her voice soft. The woman nodded and then shook her head, a movement that meant both yes and no and also please. The sound from inside the house changed, the shift in the air that occurs when a large body rises and decides to move. Lena made the smallest decision that would change everything. She looped her arm around the woman's waist, turned her toward the street, and said, "My place is right there. We can sit. That's all. Just sit." They left the porch. The door behind them opened wider, the light stretching farther out into the rain like it wanted to touch them. "Hey," the voice boomed, a sound meant to fill space and own it. Lena didn't run, running might make the chase real. She walked like a person walking her neighbor home, as if nothing about 2 women moving through rain should be worth anyone's attention. The woman's breath hitched on every 3rd step. Lena counted the hitches so she wouldn't count the feet behind them. The man stopped at the edge of the porch. His shape was a dark block in the doorway, wide shoulders, a silhouette against the cold TV light. "Where you think you're going?" he called. There was a kind of confidence in his voice that made Lena think of bulldozers, machines that didn't need to shout because their size convinced the earth to move. Lena turned her head just enough to look back without offering her throat. "She needs a minute," she said. "At my place. That's all." "Mind your own," he said. The rain made a whisper across the quiet. It ticked in the gutters, hissed in the grass. Lena kept walking. The man's boots hit the steps, 1, 2, and then stopped. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said, voice pitched lower, not a warning but a story about himself he expected others to recite. Lena didn't answer. The woman's weight grew heavier against her as they reached Lena's porch. She shifted to take more of it, felt the flutter of panic in the woman's body like a bird trapped in a chimney. Lena got the door open, the entry smelling faintly of laundry detergent and dish soap and crayons. She guided the woman inside and closed the door with a careful finality, not a slam, because a slam could be a fuse. "Bathroom straight ahead," Lena whispered. "There's a lock. I'm 2 steps away if you need me." The woman nodded and moved like a person whose skin hurt. Lena turned the deadbolt. Her hands shook. She pressed her palms against the door and counted to 5 because the first thing she had learned about fear was that it liked to outrun breath if you let it. Footsteps thudded on her porch. A fist struck the door, not hard, not yet. A testing thump. Lena's mind did the math of the life inside the house. Milo's small form asleep down the hall, the way he curled on his side like a comma, the thinness of the walls, the distance to her phone on the kitchen counter, the distance to the past she had worked so hard to put between herself and any man who believed his anger made him the center of gravity. She reached for the chain the way a person reaches for ritual. Then she left it alone. She walked to the kitchen, grabbed her phone, and called the number she knew well. Resilience Hotline, a woman answered, that calm that always reminded Lena of a deep lake. "This is Tasha." "It's Lena at Maple," Lena said, breath steady by force more than nature. "I've got a woman here. She's hurt. Perp's outside. I need guidance and I need a patrol car." "Got you," Tasha said. "You're safe inside?" "For now." "Paramedics?" "I work clinic. I can manage first response." "Copy. Officer en route. Keep the door locked, lights low, and don't engage." "What's her name?" Lena looked down the hall. The bathroom door had a strip of light at the bottom. "I don't know yet," she said. "But I'm about to." The banging stopped. The silence that followed felt like air right before it turns into a tornado, the kind that looks like any other air until it isn't. Lena slipped to the bathroom and knocked softly. "It's Lena." The lock clicked. The woman stood with a washcloth at her lip and water glass on the sink that had not been there a minute ago. She had the look of someone trying to fold herself back into a smaller shape, shoulders drawn in, chin tucked. Up close, her injuries told the truth, an old bruise under the new, a fingerprint ghosting her forearm, hair that had been yanked not by wind. "I'm Lena," she said again. "This is my house. My son's asleep down the hall. He's 5. We're okay. You're safe here." The last sentence almost made her laugh. How odd that a sentence could be true and also such a tall order. The woman watched Lena's mouth like she was reading a foreign language by sight. "I'm Mara," she said finally, the syllables careful as if she'd forgotten how to say her own name without someone else's permission. "Mara Quinn." "Hi, Mara," Lena said. She let the name sit between them like a candle. "Do you want to sit?" Mara nodded. They moved to the small living room where the couch was old and the blanket was soft. Lena kept the lights low and the TV off. She got the first aid kit from the hallway drawer, the red one Milo called the super box, and opened it like a ritual book. Saline, gauze, a small tube of antibiotic ointment, the smell of plastic and the faint bite of alcohol swabs. "Can I?" Lena asked, raising the gauze. Mara nodded. The first touch made Mara flinch. The second touch made her exhale. The human body, Lena had learned, responded as much to tone as to technique. She made her hands be the voice she would want to hear. "Do you have kids?" Lena asked, not because the question was a step in any protocol but because it pulled the air back into the room. Mara swallowed. "No," she said, then, "we tried. It wasn't, we don't." She stopped. The "not we" hung in the space. Lena nodded, not like she understood Mara's story yet, but in the larger way of recognizing another person's map had more roads than anyone else could see. "Paramedics are coming. Police too. We can talk or we can be quiet." Mara's eyes tracked the room as if she were cataloging exits. "He'll be mad," she whispered. "I know," Lena said. "That's his problem." The knock on the front door was lighter than the man's had been. The 3 soft taps of people who learned to enter other people's houses through invitation. "Police," a voice called. "It's Officer Garza." Lena looked at Mara, who closed her eyes like someone about to jump into a pool, and nodded. Lena let Garza in, a woman with rain on her hat brim and eyes that saw everything and judged nothing out loud. Behind her, a paramedic team waited in the foyer, polite as guests at a dinner party until Garza waved them forward. The professionalism calmed the air. The paramedics moved with the quiet economy of people who had already solved 100 problems that looked like this one. "Name?" one asked. "Mara," Lena answered, and it felt important that she had been the one to say it, like touching a doorframe as you pass through for luck. Garza listened while Lena explained, then went to the door and spoke to the night in a voice that meant business. The man was gone. The porch held only the black print of boot soles and rain. "House 2 doors down?" Garza asked. "Gray," Lena said. Garza nodded, radio crackling at her shoulder. "Unit 12 on scene, suspect vacated residence, likely on foot or bike." "Dispatch, confirm plate on the black FXR with red skull sticker we had flagged last month." Lena filed the detail away without meaning to. FXR, red skull. The brain did what it did. Mara insisted on going to the hospital. She said it like a confession, like she were admitting to a kind of weakness rather than choosing care. Lena packed a small bag without asking questions: phone charger, chapstick, a clean shirt that might fit, a cheap hair tie from the bowl by the keys. She had learned to offer practical kindness. Philosophy rarely stopped bleeding. "I'll be back," Garza told Lena at the door. "I need a statement. In the meantime, you did the right thing." Lena wanted to believe there was such a thing as the right thing, that morality wasn't just a set of choices that went right or wrong in retrospect. She nodded. When the door closed, the quiet felt different. Not fragile, exactly, but taut, like a rope holding something heavy just out of sight. Milo woke at 1 in the morning, the way kids do when the world tilts without permission. He padded into the living room in dinosaur pajamas, hair pointing in a dozen courageous directions. "Mom," he said, voice small and sure at once. Lena scooped him up. "Bad dream?" "No. I had to tell you Orion's belt is 3 stars, not 4. He looked around. "Why does it smell like the doctor place?" Lena kissed his forehead. "Because I cleaned a lot tonight." She had a rule about truth with Milo: never lie about the big things, and never give fear a name before it had earned one. "You're safe," she added, and she meant it as a promise to both of them. By morning, the rain had polished the neighborhood into a version of itself that looked almost honest. Lena made pancakes shaped like planets because Milo ate more when breakfast looked like outer space. She wrote a note for the daycare explaining the late night and drove him there with a smile that didn't reach the back of her throat. On the way to the clinic, she caught herself looking for red skulls on the backs of motorcycles. Every engine rumble became a question. The clinic sat in a squat building that had once been a realtor's office, the kind of place where hope was advertised on glossy paper. Now hope came in bottles and pamphlets and in the way the nurses looked you in the eye when they asked how you were. Lena moved through her morning like a musician running scales: intake forms, blood pressures, kind questions, the deliberate decision to treat every person who walked through the door as if the day might be the worst or best of their life and you couldn't know which until you asked twice and then listened in the silences. At 10:30, Officer Garza appeared in the waiting room, hat in her hands, the rain gone and the heat back in that brazen way August had. Lena stepped into the break room with her. The coffee in the pot smelled like a dare. "We found him," Garza said. "He took off before my unit got back to the house. He rides with the Angels. Name's Rourke Quinn. Goes by Rook." The word Angels landed in the room like a stone dropped through a lake. People in this town used that name the way sailors used the word reef. Some obstacles you learn to live around. Lena didn't pretend the word didn't twist something in her gut. "Is he in custody?" she asked. Garza shook her head. "Not yet. There's a warrant out, and I've made a call to the liaison we use for club issues. He'll find out we're looking, if he hasn't already." She paused, like she was deciding how much to say to a woman who had opened the door to the wrong kind of weather. They don't love cops. But they do love order. Sometimes those two things meet. Lena thought of Mara's face when she said he'll be mad. Is Mara safe? She's at county, getting scans. We've got an officer on her door. We'll move her if we need to. Garza took a breath like stepping onto a thin bridge. I won't sugarcoat it. You might see bikes on your street for a while. Don't engage. Call me. Lock your doors. I always do, Lena said, because women like her learned to make habit of the things that kept them alive. The rest of the day moved in fragments: someone's baby with a fever, a diabetic foot check, a man who needed stitches but not the lecture that used to come with them because Lena had learned that people did the best they could until they could do better. She didn't check her phone during shifts, a rule she broke only to answer texts from daycare or the hospital. At lunch, she let herself read one from a number she didn't recognize. Thank you, it said. Just that. No name. But the gratitude in it was so pure that she could hear the voice that typed it. Mara. By late afternoon, the sky had gone from clean blue to the gray that made shadows look honest. Lena picked up Milo, who told her he had invented a new dinosaur named a Millosaurus that ate pancakes and mean dreams. She laughed the kind of laugh that let something unclench for a second. On the way home, a pack of bikes passed them on the state road, the sound of them a low avalanche. Lena didn't breathe until they were gone. Maple Avenue looked like itself, the peeling paint on the yellow house, the battered mailbox at the corner, the leaning oak that had survived 3 storms and a neighbor's threat to cut it down. Lena parked, carried groceries in on one hip and Milo on the other because he had fallen asleep claiming he wasn't tired. She set him on the couch, covered him with the soft blanket, and told herself tonight would be easier because she had done the hard thing already. The universe didn't owe her fairness, but maybe it owed her a decent night of television and laundry. At 6, someone knocked. Not the heavy knock of the man, not the 3 polite taps of the police. This knock had rhythm to it, a little syncopation. Lena opened the door to find a woman in her 30s with eyes the color of road dust and a leather jacket that had seen more miles than most marriages. You Lena? The woman asked. Yes. I'm Danny. She said it like the introduction was a tool. I run with the East Side Charter. I heard you helped Mara last night. Lena didn't invite her in. She stepped onto the porch and pulled the door mostly closed behind her so the living room stayed a soft cave where a boy could dream about stars. I did what anyone would do. Danny snorted without malice. Nah. Plenty of folks heard that girl and went deaf. She studied Lena's face like a mechanic studies a stubborn bolt. Rook is out, she said. And he's mean when he's embarrassed. He'll be looking to punish the person who made him look small, and that wasn't the cops. Danny's mouth tilted in the smallest smile. You made him look small. Lena felt heat in her face that had nothing to do with pride. What do you want me to do? Nothing, Danny said. Lock your door. Keep your kid close. And if you see 100 bikes on this street, don't panic until I tell you to. Lena blinked. That's supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be information. Danny's gaze shifted to something over Lena's shoulder. Your boy sleeps hard? Sometimes. Good. Don't wake him if you can help it. Danny took a card from her jacket pocket and pressed it into Lena's hand. It was the size and shape of any business card, but it only had a number and the word Danny. If anything moves in the dark that shouldn't, call me before you call 911. You'll have better odds. Lena wanted to argue. She wanted to tell this woman that odds and justice ought to live in the same house. But she had seen enough to know that sometimes they didn't even share a zip code. Okay, she said. Danny's eyes softened. You're brave, she said. That's not the same thing as reckless. Don't confuse them. When Danny left, the air felt like it had been tuned to a lower frequency. The evening went on, pasta boiled, a cartoon murmured, Milo woke and told her he'd dreamed he could jump high enough to pet the moon. Lena laughed again, and the sound felt like a gift from a future that had decided to send a postcard. At 8:15, with dishes done and a load of towels humming in the washer, Lena stood at the sink and watched darkness take the street. It did it the way darkness always did, slow, at first, like it wanted to give you time to make peace with it, and then all at once, like a secret with no interest in compromise. A far-off rumble reached her ears. She told herself it was a truck on the highway. The rumble grew. It wasn't a truck. It was many engines, the sound knitting itself into something larger than its parts. Lena turned off the sink. She wiped her hands on a dish towel she couldn't remember picking up. She stood very still because instinct told her stillness was the last power she owned. Headlights appeared at the end of Maple, twin eyes multiplied by a dozen, then 2 dozen, then more, growing from pinpricks to planets. The first bikes turned onto the street like a river does when it decides on a new course, smooth and inevitable. Chrome caught the last of the day's ghost light. The sound filled the bones of the houses. Lena didn't move. She listened for Milo. He slept. The bikes rolled past the yellow house, past the leaning oak, past the gray bungalow where the porch light was off in the way lights are off when someone wants to convince themselves they're invisible. The bikes slowed in front of Lena's house and then, God help them all, stopped. Her porch light was on because she believed in small acts of defiance. The yard filled with men and women in leathers, patches that told stories Lena didn't know how to read yet. The Angel's Death's Head logo flashed in the moving dark like a coin in a magician's hand. Helmets came off. Faces turned toward her house, and Lena felt her heart knock once, hard, the way it had the day she signed the lease and chose hope over the safer boredom of staying put. At the front of the pack was a man who didn't need to be the tallest to stand like height had decided to pay him a visit anyway. He cut the engine, and the quiet that followed was not quiet at all but a different kind of noise, a pressure change, a gasp held by 100 lungs. The man lifted his chin at Lena's window as if he could see her behind the curtain. Lena did not step back. She had learned that hiding and refusing to hide felt the same from the inside, a kind of shaking you had to name brave to keep it from eating you. She lifted the curtain 2 inches. The man saw the movement and smiled like a knife learning it could reflect sunlight. Another bike pulled up alongside him, a woman rider with hair braided tight and eyes that picked her battles 10 minutes before everyone else knew a fight was coming. Danny. She met Lena's gaze through the glass and nodded once, a small motion that meant both I'm here and do not open the door unless I say. The man at the front stood. His patch read President. The rocker above the Death's Head said East Side, and beneath it, an embroidered name, King. He took off his gloves with the unhurried care of someone about to hold a thing he didn't intend to break unless he had to. Neighbors' curtains twitched. Phones lifted. Maple Avenue, which had been the kind of street where cars parked half on lawns and people waved with a beer in their hand, was now an arena. Lena could feel its attention like heat. King stepped onto her lawn. He didn't come up the porch steps. He stood in the wet grass where the sprinkler had left small diamonds on the blades and looked at her door like it might answer him. When he spoke, his voice was not a shout. It had the resonance of someone who rarely needed to raise it. Lena Morell, he called. My name is King Anders. I need a word. Danny's head turned infinitesimally. Lena could almost hear the translation. If he wanted trouble, he'd have brought it to the porch without asking. But need and want were not the same. Lena opened the door to the chain. The night air pressed in, exhaust and rain and the sharp tang of adrenaline, which had its own smell. "There's a child asleep inside," she said, voice even. "If you wake him, I will be less kind than I'm trying to be." King's mouth did something that might have been respect. He tipped his chin. "He won't wake," he said. "We're not here to harm you." "Then why are you here?" Lena asked. The chain between them glinted like a question mark. King looked left, toward the gray bungalow. "Mara Quina's family," he said. "Some things we don't tolerate. We came to make sure the message lands." Lena's mind tried to hold two truths at once, that 100 bikes could be a threat, and that people sometimes used numbers to build walls around the vulnerable rather than to storm them. "And Rook?" she asked. The name stuck to the roof of her mouth like gum she couldn't spit out. "Handling Rook is club business," King said. His tone didn't invite comment. "But your name came up when we asked what happened. So we're here to look you in the eye and say thank you. And to say your house is under our watch until the thing is done." Lena didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. She opted for both and kept her face calm to cover it. "I have a job," she said. "A life. I can't have a motorcade every time I go to the grocery store." King's smile was brief, like a flash of lightning that had somewhere else to be. "You won't," he said. "But tonight, we make the point. People like Rook understand theater." Danny stepped closer to the porch. "You okay?" she asked softly. Lena thought about the last 24 hours, about Mara's trembling hand in Milo's Orion, about the way fear felt at 1 in the morning versus how it felt at 8 at night when a crowd had chosen your lawn to be the place where power explained itself. "I don't know what I am," she said. King's gaze shifted to her eyes and didn't move. "You're the kind of person we remember," he said. "That matters." He nodded once to someone behind him. Engines flared and died like fireflies. The 100 settled into a formation that, from above, would have looked like a perimeter drawn by a careful hand. Lena realized, with a jolt like missing a step, that they weren't surrounding her to trap her, they were surrounding her to declare her under a banner she didn't ask to stand beneath. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing. Lena's gut tightened. She didn't want a war on her lawn between the cops and the club playing out inches from Milo's dreams. She looked at Danny. Danny looked at King. King looked at the siren's direction and then back at Lena like a chess player considering the board. "Garza," Lena said, because the only leverage she had was a name that chose de-escalation when given the chance. "Officer Garza knows me. If this becomes something, she'll make it less." King nodded, an acknowledgement and a test. "Call her," he said. "Tell her we're here on courtesy, and we'll be gone in 30. He glanced again toward the gray bungalow. "Less, if we spot our problem." Lena closed the door enough to unchain it and opened it again because sometimes the only way to own a moment was to refuse to be small in it. "You step on my porch," she told King, "you do it like you're coming into a church." King stepped up. He wiped his boots on the mat without being asked. He removed his hat the way men used to in old movies, and for a second, despite everything, Lena felt the simplest human thing, the urge to laugh because the world was absurd, and also you had to give it rules or it would make its own. She dialed Garza. The phone rang twice. "You okay?" Garza asked. The question held urgency and the kind of steadiness that made people tell the truth. "There's 100 bikes on my lawn," Lena said. "They say they're here to protect, not to hurt. King Anders asked me to tell you it's courtesy, not a problem. He'll be gone in 30. She paused. "You coming?" "I'm already 2 blocks out," Garza said. "Tell him I don't want a parade, and I don't want a fight. I want quiet. I can give him 15 minutes to be a gentleman and then I need my street back." Lena related. King's mouth did that almost smile again. "Your cop's got manners," he said. "That's rare coin." Danny's head cocked. Her eyes had shifted from cool to alert so subtly that Lena almost missed it. King shifted too, the way wolves do when the wind changes. The 100 fell silent in a way that wasn't silence at all, it was attention, amplified. From the dark crease between two houses, a figure moved. Not bold, not fast, but with the particular gait of someone who believed stealth was a superpower but didn't know how to wear it right. The figure paused in the shadow, then stepped into the penumbra of Lena's porch light. Rook. Lena knew before she knew how. The body told the story, the shoulders that rounded not from labor but from a lifetime of leaning over people smaller than him, the tilt of the head that said he enjoyed the view from that angle. His face was handsomer than she expected in the way of predators who learned to weaponize charm. He smiled like he'd been invited to a party and the host just didn't know it yet. "Baby," he called, voice slick as oil. For a second, Lena's mind refused to process who he thought he was talking to. Then she realized he wasn't speaking to her at all. His eyes were fixed on the second window to the left of her door, the window of Milo's room. Lena's blood did a thing she had only felt twice in her life. It went very cold and very fast and then turned into something that looked like rage when you could afford to show it. She stepped forward, and King's arm shot out across the porch, not touching her, just existing where she might otherwise move. "Rook," King said, voice held low enough to be a private conversation accidentally overheard by 100. "You step away from that window." Rook's smile widened. His eyes flicked to King and then slid past him like he was a lamppost. "Club business," he said, almost sing-song. "You don't speak on my marriage, King. You don't speak on my house." He took 2 steps closer to the window. He raised his hand like he was blessing the glass. "Mara," he called softly, and the softness made it worse. "Come home." "She's not there," Lena said, because words were the one thing she could throw without breaking her own windows. "She's safe. And you're done." Rook looked at her then, really looked, like he'd found the person who'd put a scratch down his favorite car. "You," he said. "Nosy little saint." He took another step toward the window. The 100 shifted as one organism. The night leaned in like an audience. Sirens rounded the corner. Red and blue washed the maple leaves in colors God never intended. Garza's cruiser slid to a stop like a well-aimed word. She stepped out with her hands open and her spine straight. "Evening," she said, to the street at large and to King in particular. King's chin dipped, not submissive, not defiant, a recognition of shared rank on different ships. "Officer." Garza's eyes took in the tableau, the 100, the house with the porch light, the man in the shadow of the boy's window. "Mr. Quinn," she said, voice changing temperature by 1.5 degrees. "We have a warrant." "Hands where I can see them." Rook didn't move his hands. He lifted his chin like posture was a shield. "You think I'm scared of paper?" he said. Then, to Lena, almost tender, "You think this is done because you opened a door?" Lena did not answer him. She looked at Milo's window. She looked at Danny. She looked at King. Somewhere behind Rook, a spark flew, a cigarette, discarded, arc bright against the dark, and in that flicker, Lena saw her life pulled taut between what she feared and what she refused to let fear decide. King took 1 step off the porch. "Rook," he said, each syllable a boundary. "You don't go near that window." Rook smiled without humor. "Make me." The 100 inhaled, collective. The street felt like the second before lightning remembers how to be fire. Garza's hand lowered to her radio. Danny's boot shifted, 1/2 inch of strategy. The night held its breath. Rook reached out and placed his palm flat, very gently, against the glass of Milo's window. And from inside the house, a sound rose that did not belong to any of them, a small voice, awake now, sang from his bed, very clear and very brave, "Mom?" Lena's heart moved before her feet did. She stepped through the doorway, into the porch light, past the line where King could stop her, her body the oldest kind of shield, her voice a thing she hadn't planned to use as a weapon and would now wield like the name of a god. "Milo," she called, steady as a lighthouse. "Stay in bed. I'm here." Rook's hand stayed on the glass. He tilted his head, listening for the tremble in her. Lena didn't give it to him. Behind her, the 100 adjusted, a perimeter tightening. In front of her, Garza's voice was low into her radio, summoning something that might be kindness or might be war. Rook's fingers curled, just slightly, on the pane. The glass made a sound like the first syllable of a scream. In the porch light, the whole house, the entire street, went black. Went black. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The darkness arrived like a door closing on its hinges, smooth and absolute. For half a heartbeat the world was sound, the collective intake of breath from 100 riders, the soft clack of Garza's radio, the slow, unmistakable rasp of a man's palm sliding on glass. Lena felt the dark like cloth laid over her face, smelled rain and oil and wet grass. Her body remembered the house better than her eyes did. 3 steps to Milo's room. 2 to the left for the light switch that wouldn't answer. 1 to the small table where she kept the flashlight that was actually a phone set to low brightness because bright light woke a child all the way instead of half. Her fingers closed on the phone. She didn't turn it on. Light drew attention. Instead, she moved by the map her days had made of the place, the nick in the floorboard just before the hall turned, the faint cool where air leaked under the bedroom door. Milo, she said, voice even because even was a bridge. Stay in bed. Hands under the blanket. I'm here. What happened? Milo asked, small voice, not scared exactly, but curious threaded through with caution like a stripe. We lost the lights, Lena said. It's okay. Behind her, the porch was a silhouette of figures in intention. The engines had cut with the power, or maybe she had forgotten the sound in the way fear edited background noise. She could hear King's voice, low and distinct, hold formation. No one moves unless I say. She could hear Danny, closer than that, a whisper of leather and resolve, window, window, window. Rook's palm slid again. A tiny sound of stress whispered through the glass. Not a crack, not yet, but the house felt it and told her. Lena's hand found Milo's door handle. She eased it open and the dark inside felt different, smaller, bound by stars taped to the ceiling that drank what little light remained from the street and gave none back. She moved toward the bed, and her knee brushed the toy bin, and in the quiet the slight hollow plastic sound seemed to her as loud as a dropped pan. She leaned over the bed and found Milo by the heat of him and the soft, familiar sound he made when he thought, a kind of hum too quiet for anyone else to hear. She touched his hair, the small whirl that told her where to part it in the morning. I'm going to stand between you and the window, she said. You can hold the back of my shirt, okay? He didn't argue. His fingers found fabric and made a tether. The line from his hand to her heart was shorter than that. Lena turned toward the window and placed her palm on her side of the glass opposite Rook's. It was an absurd gesture, the wall between them solid, her hand small, his bigger, but it felt like drawing a chalk line in a game whose rules no one had agreed on until now. The cool of the pain seeped into her skin. Through it, the heat of his palm. For a brief, surreal second, the 2 temperatures made a single truth: there are lines that should not be crossed. Step back, Rook. King's voice again, closer than before, carrying command without effort. You're in a place where you don't belong. Club business, Rook murmured, but the words had lost their bounce. He pressed a little harder, and the glass gave a small, crystalline protest. Lena could feel the vibration through her bones. Mara, he said softly, still clinging to his script. Baby, I'm sorry. She can't hear you, Lena said, and this time her voice was not only even, it was unmovable. But I can. And my son can. And he will not learn from you that a man's anger is a god we all have to worship. Maybe he didn't hear her. Maybe he did. The night moved on anyway. Far out on Maple, Garza's backup cruisers arrived and settled at the edges like parentheses meant to keep the sentence from running away. Her radio clicked, the dispatcher's voice said something about a blown transformer and a rolling outage. The universe had chosen dramatic timing without asking permission. Hands where I can see them, Garza called, her voice a metronome in the dark. Rook didn't lift his hands. Lena could feel his breath now through the tiniest cracks between pane and frame, a warmth that made the cool of the glass seem personal. She imagined, for a wild, unhelpful second, reaching through physics, through wood and space and the years that had taught men like him their names were passes to any room. She imagined taking his wrist and bending it away from her house the way you redirect a snake with a stick you don't mind snapping. The club moved. Not forward. Not toward him. They adjusted, a circle tightening like a camera aperture, lightless but precise. Danny's voice, quiet as a thought, left flank ready. The words meant nothing to Lena except that adults were doing adult math outside her house while she stood with a boy's hand fisted in her shirt and her palm on a barrier thinner than she wanted to believe. "Rook," King said, each syllable clipped. "Do not make me disrespect your patch." Rook laughed, a small sound meant for himself. "You won't," he said. "You love the rules too much." And then he curled his fingers into a fist and drew it back, and everything in Lena's body said no. The sound of the punch was a white thing, simple and clean. The glass starred, a spider web blooming out from a knuckle print. Milo flinched. Lena didn't. She didn't because if she flinched it became instruction, and this could not become a lesson, she confirmed. The pain held. It wouldn't hold another. "Now," King said. The porch exploded into motion that wasn't loud so much as coordinated. Two silhouettes moved from the left, club members with hands empty but purposeful. Garza's beam knifed the dark, a white cone that found Rook's face and froze it. Another beam joined hers, and another, and suddenly the night had a direction. In the glare, Rook looked smaller. Not because his body had changed, but because the light told the truth. Violence was often a performance best suited to dim rooms. A hand caught Rook's wrist mid-swing from the side, not hard enough to break, but with the assertive weight of a door that wasn't going to be opened. Another hand found his shoulder. "Don't," a voice said, breathing, not a threat, a warning delivered like weather. Rook twisted, old habits looking for purchase. The 100 adjusted again. Lena saw the choreography without understanding the steps, pressure applied from angles he hadn't expected, a dance that placed him away from the glass, away from the window, away from her boy. Garza spoke into the radio. "Now." The second cruiser's door opened. The officers moved in with that balanced caution of people trained to be careful until they had to be something else. "Rourke Quinn," Garza said, formal and sterile and exactly correct. "Hands behind your back." Rook's eyes cut to King. "You let cops put hands on me?" His voice made the words a dare. King's answer was not for Rook, not for Lena, not for the officers. He spoke to the night and to the rules that kept men from turning into animals in front of children. "You put your hand on a child's window," he said. "You did that, not me. You answer for it." The cuff click was small and loud at once. Rook shifted, choosing between fight and something else. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Lena felt something in her chest unwind by an inch. Behind her, Milo breathed in carefully and then out, as if the world had asked him to hold his breath while adults rearranged it. The lights came back like a sigh. Houses woke, air conditioners churned, the porch bulb glowed steady and unromantic. The broken star in the window looked ordinary now, the way tragedy becomes a chore as soon as the sun returns. Garza nodded once to King, once to Lena, then guided Rook toward the cruiser, reading him his rights in that same even tone she had used to introduce herself in Lena's hallway hours before. Danny climbed the porch. Up close, her face was the map of a night driven hard, the kind of tired that meant the body would pay a bill due in the morning. "You good?" she asked Lena softly. Lena looked at her hand against the cracked glass. She lifted it, and the pain trembled a final time, a small exhale of a thing that had done its job. "I'm good," she said, surprised to discover that the words were not an act of will but a report from inside. She turned and crouched, finding Milo's face in the shallow glow. "Hey, astronaut," she said, touching his cheek. "I'm going to tape the window like a puzzle until the man comes to fix it. Then we'll read about constellations." "Okay," he said, his voice riding the edge between adventure and sleep. Do the tape make it stronger? It makes it together, she said. Sometimes that's the same thing. By the time the patrol cars rolled away, Rook in the back seat staring at a middle distance that did not include any god anyone Lena knew believed in, the 100 had eased their engines back into a low murmur. King stood on her lawn while neighbors pretended they weren't at their windows. He put his hat back on like a period placed deliberately at the end of a run-on sentence. I said 30, he told Lena, and we made it in 22. A flicker of humor. Then, serious, we'll keep a shadow on the house for a while. Not a parade. A shadow. Lena should have said no. She should have asserted something about normalcy and not needing watchers and wanting her street back. But something in her, something less prideful and more honest, recognized that some kinds of attention weren't ownership, they were witness. Okay, she said. A shadow. He tipped 2 fingers off the brim. You did right by Mara. Not everyone would have opened a door. I didn't open it because of her, Lena said before she could tidy the truth. I opened it because of who I am. She felt the weight of those words and didn't flinch from them. King's eyes warmed by a degree. That's the only reason that lasts. He turned to Danny. Walk the perimeter, then stand down. Danny nodded. To Lena, she said, I'll text when we're clear. After the last engine note folded into the night, after the neighbors' curtains untwitched and the cricket chorus remembered its own song, Lena taped the window in long, careful strips that made a star look like geometry class. Milo watched until his eyes drooped. She carried him to her bed because small boys slept better that way after nights when the world had opinions about them. She lay awake a long time listening to the house remember how to rest. Morning came with the kind of light that makes even cracked glass look manageable. Lena made coffee like it was a sacrament. Her phone vibrated with 3 messages, one from Garza, Rook in holding, arraignment at noon, one from Tasha, safe house ready for Mara when discharged, and one with no name, I heard the window. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'll try to be brave. The last one felt like it had been typed while someone looked over a shoulder. At 10, Lena dropped Milo at daycare with an extra hug and a reminder that Orion was 3 stars. She drove to County, not because anyone had asked but because her legs wanted to carry gratitude to the place where Fear had slept in a hospital bed overnight. In the elevator, she watched herself in the stainless steel reflection, a woman in yesterday's shirt with a thin silver chain around her neck and a look that said tired but not beaten. Mara's room smelled like antiseptic and new resolve. She sat by the window with a blanket tucked around her, hair braided back from her face, swelling reduced to the point where her features showed themselves again. When she saw Lena, something in her posture changed, unfolded a millimeter, as if the body recognized a person who had stood between it and a fist. I should have texted, Mara said. Her voice was less thready, more hers. Thank you for everything. Lena, Saturday you don't owe me anything. She meant it as an absolution, not as distance. Mara looked down at her hands. There were faint half-moons on her palms, the marks of a woman who had held on to something too tight for too long. They said he was arrested. He was, Lena said. Garza's good. She'll keep it handled. Mara nodded with that small jerk people make when they try not to cry. The club won't, she stopped, because the question was a door best opened carefully. I don't want more violence because of me. They're choosing order, Lena said. It was the only word that felt clean and true. And the law is on your side tonight. She did not add that order and law sometimes parted ways, there would be time later for a more complicated map. Mara took a breath like someone trying to fill new lungs. I feel stupid, she whispered. For surviving? For letting it get this far. She covered one eye with her hand, as if testing how the world looked when half of it was shadow. Lena wanted to take her hands and say the thing no one had told her when she had learned the contours of harm, that smart women found themselves in bad weather not because they loved storms but because storms learned their names early, that shame was an inheritance she did not have to keep. Instead, she said, it didn't start this far. It started with small things that pretended to be love. And you're here now. That's not stupid. That's stubborn. Mara's laugh was short and surprised. Stubborn, she repeated, like trying on a coat and finding it fit. At noon, Lena walked into the courthouse not because she liked such rooms but because she believed in showing up. The hallway smelled like oiled wood and anxiety. Garza found her by the water fountain and nodded in greeting that doubled as gratitude. "You want to sit in?" she asked. Lena pressed her lips together. "Do I need to?" "No," Garza said. "But people like you change the temperature of a room." Arraignment was a short ritual, a first act in a longer play. Rook stood with hands clasped and a face arranged into a look that was supposed to say misunderstood rather than dangerous. The judge set a protective order with the kind of steel he reserved for cases that made newspapers whether he wanted them to or not. Bail was discussed and denied. Rook's eyes flicked once, unavoidably, to the gallery. Lena felt the look and did not accept it. Beside her, Danny stood with arms folded, an emblem of a world the judge did not understand but respected tonight because respect was cheaper than stupidity. After, in the hallway, Danny said, "He'll push. It's what he knows. But he's on a short leash." She nodded at Lena's phone. "You got my number. Use it." "Why are you doing this?" Lena asked, real curiosity threading the words. Danny shrugged in a way that demonstrated not indifference but economy. "We look after our own. Mara's not that on paper anymore, but she is in the ways that matter. And you," she squinted like trying to line up an image at distance. "You did a thing that admits you into the kind of family you don't pick at a picnic." She smirked. "Congratulations and also my condolences." The days that followed bent themselves into a shape Lena had not known a week ago. At first, there was the Shadow King promised, one bike parked down the block where Maple met Pine, another rolling past at odd hours like a heartbeat. Not menacing. Not absent. A presence like a porch light left on to tell history you were not at home to it tonight. Neighbors talked, of course they did, but not always in the way gossip chews. Mrs. Huang from the corner brought dumplings and advice. Mr. Reyes across the street offered to replace the window for the cost of materials because he remembered when a man had stood on his porch a decade ago and told him the neighborhood didn't belong to him. Lena fixed the pane, then the frame, then the way the house breathed air in winter. She slept sometimes. She learned that vigilance could live beside rest if you made them share a room. Milo asked questions in the frank way of children who hadn't yet learned the art of walking around hard things. "Why did that man touch our window?" he asked. Lena said, "Because he forgot where his story ended and ours began." Milo nodded like she'd given him the location of a dragon cave. Mara moved to the safe house and then to a small apartment above a bakery that woke at 4 a.m. with the smell of bread strong enough to teach the son ambition. She got a phone the club paid for and a number only 5 people knew. She went to counseling at a center Tasha connected her to, where rooms were painted calm and the chairs didn't try to trap you. She found the corners of herself that belonged only to her and not to the man who had tried to own even her shadow. On Tuesdays she sat across a small table from Lena and folded laundry at Lena's kitchen island because doing a simple thing with your hands while saying complicated things out loud made the complicated things easier to hold. "You ever think about the version of you in a different house?" Mara asked one evening, laying a t-shirt flat with the precision of a person who had learned to control the few things she could. Lena smiled, not unkind. "All the time." She thought of the house with a husband in it, the one she had left 2 years ago when she learned that kindness that came and went like weather was not kindness at all. She didn't say his name, she didn't have to. "But I like this version of me more." Mara nodded. "Me too," she said quietly. It took Lena a second to realize Mara had meant herself. The court dates marched. Rook hired a lawyer who wore slick suits and aimed for swagger. The charges didn't care about his wardrobe. Witness statements stacked neatly, Garza's detail, Lena's calm report, the scuffed knuckles that told a story the window had started. At a pretrial hearing, Rook tried to catch Lena's eyes. She looked past him at the courtroom flag. She had learned there were places her gaze did not need to go. Outside the courthouse, King waited once, leaning against a bike that looked older than some of the officers in the building but better cared for. His face was hard to read if you didn't know which lines of it were humor and which were warning. "You holding up?" he asked. "I am," Lena said. It was not bravado. It was inventory. He nodded. "We handle our end." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. She wasn't sure she wanted to know whether handling meant a conversation, a sanction, a form of exile that looked like geography or like silence. The only thing she cared about was that Rook would never again make a house forget its own boundaries. On a Thursday 3 weeks after the window cracked, Lena got a call from Tasha. "We got grant money," Tasha said, voice bright as a new penny. "Enough to open a second group and to fund an emergency kit program, the go bags we want folks to have, so leaving doesn't mean choosing between shoes and a toothbrush." "That's good," Lena said, smiling into the phone, because good news looks better if someone else can see you wearing it. "What changed?" "Somebody put us on a list," Tasha said, teasing without telling. "Somebody with access to folks who have more money than time and more bikes than sense." Lena closed her eyes. She could see the meeting in her head: King at a table made from reclaimed wood in a room that smelled like gasoline and coffee, Danny adding a comment where it would matter, men who wore leather in public and grief in private nodding because sometimes the way you loved your people was by funding a thing you didn't know how to say out loud. The KIT program launched with fanfare Lena hadn't sought and dignity she had insisted on. They called it the doorway because names mattered, and this one said what needed saying: that leaving wasn't a failure, it was an entry to a room with air. Lena spoke at the center's opening not because she liked microphones but because there were girls in the back row who would Google her later and discover a woman could be afraid and also get the thing done. "Safety isn't a straight line," she said into a microphone that popped on the consonants. "It's a series of decisions we make in rooms that don't always feel like ours. Tonight we're building rooms that do." She didn't thank the club by name from the podium because the world is complicated and optics are a fragile resource, but after, in the parking lot, King shook her hand and Danny squeezed her shoulder, and the respect in that half-circle felt like a kind of church where everyone understood the sermon without needing scripture. The final hearing arrived on a day that smelled like rain and hot metal. Rook sat at the defense table with a look that had learned to imitate remorse. The DA did not perform, he presented. The judge listened with the patience of a man who had heard every story and still believed his job mattered. When the sentence landed, time behind bars, strict orders, distance written into law, Lena felt relief move through the room like a breeze finding all the open windows at once. After, in the hallway where the varnish had absorbed 100 celebrations and 1,000 griefs, Mara put her forehead against the cool wall and let out a breath that had been held for years. Lena touched her shoulder, a light weight that said, "I'm here," without saying any words that might get in the way of a breath this important. "What do I do now?" Mara asked, and she wasn't asking Lena to tell her, she was asking the universe to listen to her try the question on. "You live," Lena said. "You get to decide what that looks like." Mara wiped her eyes and laughed, a real sound this time, the kind that plants seeds only joy knows about. "I might dye my hair purple," she said, as if daring herself. "Do it," Lena said. "Be the comet." Autumn tucked itself around the town. The heat left without apologizing. Leaves learn how to give up gracefully. Lena settled into a new normal that didn't pretend safety was permanent but didn't let fear rent the guest room either. She worked. She read with Milo about nebulae and tides and why shadows look longer in winter. She and Mara carried boxes down narrow stairs on a Saturday morning and sat on the floor of Mara's new place eating cinnamon rolls out of a paper bag while the radiator clanked like an old man practicing tap. One afternoon, as the sun slid toward a horizon full of red-shouldered clouds, engines rolled onto Maple again. Not 100, Lena's heart counted without asking, but enough that the street did the thing it had learned to do: quiet, tilt, pay attention. Lena stepped onto the porch before anyone knocked because she refused to let surprise be the story she told herself about power. King stood on the walk. Danny at his elbow. Behind them, a handful of riders at rest the way wolves rest, ready without twitching. King held something in one hand that looked like a tidy rectangle wrapped in butcher paper and string. We brought a thing, he said, almost apologetic, as if the gesture required humility to fit the neighborhood. You didn't have to, Lena said, which was the correct response and also true. Probably not, he agreed. He offered the package. It's a thank you. And an ask. Lena raised an eyebrow, took the parcel. Inside, under brown paper and care, was a framed photograph. It had been taken from the opposite side of the street, angle slightly low, like the photographer had been a person willing to kneel to get it right. In the picture, her house stood with the porch light on, the night of the window. Around it, the bikes had formed that particular protective halo that looked like siege until you knew what language it spoke. At the center, Lena, a silhouette, one hand on a window, the other likely held by a boy you couldn't see but could feel in the shape of her stance. The light had blown out her face, but the posture was readable even if you didn't have the context, a human being making herself into a wall and a welcome at the same time. Lena's throat went tight. What's the ask, she managed. There's a charity ride next month, Danny said, because she had learned that King delegated the things she could say better. For the center. We want you to ride in the lead car. Not on a bike, she added quickly, hands up, grinning. We're not animals. Just, lead us out. Let folks see who they're riding for. Lena looked past them at the street that had become a stage and a sanctuary in equal turns. She could feel neighbors behind curtains, ready to text each other about the woman who had led 100 death's heads through town in the name of something soft. She pictured Milo in the passenger seat of a car at the front of a line that sounded like thunder and smelled like gasoline and intention. She pictured Mara on the sidewalk with hair the color of rebellion. Okay, she said. I'll do it. On the day of the ride, Maple held a kind of carnival that kept itself decent. Garza directed traffic and a neon vest like morality came in fluorescent when you needed it to. The center hung a banner that didn't brag, just informed. The ride rolled out slow, dignified, a ribbon of chrome and leather and human beings who had decided to transform noise into money and attention into resources. Lena sat in the lead car with Milo, who wore earmuffs and an expression that suggested he had seen dragons and now realized this was better because it was real. She waved at faces she knew and ones she didn't. Some waved back. Some nodded. Some simply looked and then looked at the person next to them with the kind of look that meant stories would be told later over dinner. Halfway down Main, Lena saw a woman standing by a lamppost, arms folded, watching. Her hair was purple. The color glowed even in the mild sun. Mara lifted a hand and put 2 fingers to her mouth and then her heart and then pointed at Lena, a gesture friends invented when words and distance made clumsy dance partners. Lena returned it, 2 fingers to lips, to heart, out. The world in that moment righted itself by a degree she felt in her bones. The ride ended at the center, where tables waited with sandwiches and coffee in forms that turned intention into action. The club wrote a check with numbers that would make a difference. Tasha cried in the office and then laughed in the hallway because the body doesn't always know which to pick. Garza walked through the crowd like a chaperone at a prom that was somehow also a town hall, nodding when she saw the people she had kept safe and the people who had made her job harder become the same people for an afternoon. At dusk, when the engines quieted and the banner sagged a little and the volunteers stacked chairs with that particular weariness that comes from having done a good thing, Lena stood on the curb and let the whole day rinse her. King stopped beside her, hands in pockets, looking at the horizon the way men do who prefer simple statements to metaphor. You ever get tired of being brave? He asked, not as a challenge, as a friend. Lena considered. I get tired of needing to be, she said. But then the next thing comes, and you either are or you wish you had been. He nodded. We'll be around less, he said. That's how this goes. Shadows don't become habits. I know, she said. And she did. The season was changing. Safety wasn't a promise, it was a practice. That night, back on Maple, Lena tucked Milo into bed. He pointed at the constellations on the ceiling. That one is you, he said, pointing to a cluster of stars she had placed without a pattern because sometimes life looked like that. It's called the window. Lena laughed, the sound soft enough not to scare the dark. The window? Yeah, he said, resolute. Because you make the bad guys bounce off. He demonstrated with a small hand thumping a pillow and springing back. Lena kissed his forehead. Sleep, she said. Tomorrow there's pancakes. When the house quieted, she stood alone in the living room and looked at the framed photograph on the wall. The porch light glowed, perpetual in its frozen second, the circle of bikes, the stance she'd taken without a rehearsal. She thought of every woman who would see that photo in this room and feel a small spark say yes, you too. She thought of Mara in her bakery apartment washing flour from her wrists. She thought of Danny, who would forever look like she was already arriving at the next crucial moment, and of Garza, whose voice had learned how to become louder than 100 engines. Lena turned off the lamp. The window, fixed now, reflected her back to herself. Outside, the street was ordinary in the way extraordinary things become after the emergency has passed and the bills arrive. She didn't mistake ordinary for boring anymore. It was the thing she had fought for. It was the thing she would keep choosing. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number that she knew anyway because gratitude carries a signature. The purple is bright, it read. The bread rose perfectly today. I'm okay. Thank you for my door. Lena replied, keep walking through. Winter would come. Spring would undo it. The town would hold its breath and release it 100 more times. And somewhere, in houses with porch lights and houses without, women would open doors and walk into rooms that matched their names. Lena thought she might paint the living room in the spring, something that made morning feel like a promise even on days when it wasn't. She thought she might start a reading group at the center for kids who needed 2 hours a week of books that said you could be braver than the loudest thing in the room. She thought she might buy a better flashlight. She locked the door. Not because the world was full of monsters. Because the world was full of people, and people were complicated, and locks were one of the civil things we invented to remind ourselves we had boundaries and the right to keep them. She went to bed and slept the way you do when your body has decided it can put some of the heavy things down for the night. Morning came. Pancakes happened, round and patient. Lena flipped them with a practiced wrist. Milo arranged blueberries in Orion's belt and one comet he insisted was allowed to pass through the kitchen as long as it said please. The sun came into the house the way it always had and always would until the day she moved. It pooled on the floorboards in a bright rectangle that invited a small boy to build a city out of blocks and a woman to sit with a mug and plan a life that didn't apologize for existing. The doorbell rang once, polite. Lena answered to find a single helmet on the mat, black, glossy, not new, cleaned, no note, no flourishes. She recognized the make and the particular were on the edge where a hand tended to put it down. Danny's. Inside, taped to the padding, a sticker with a phone number and 4 words, in case of thunder. Lena laughed out loud, the sound sliding down the hall as Milo looked up. What's funny? He asked. Somebody told me I don't have to be brave alone, she said. He nodded with the wisdom of 5. You never did. He returned to building, and the blue block he picked up next fit like it had been waiting for that exact spot. Lena set the helmet on the shelf by the door next to a bowl of keys and a jar that held exactly $4.73 in quarters. In the glass of the now-whole window, the porch light's reflection overlapped with the morning sun, and for a second both lights occupied the same space. It wasn't a miracle. It was the way angles work when you stand in the right place. She stood there a while, watching the ordinary light make the room look like something worth defending and worth resting in. Because in the end, all the noise and all the engines, all the courtrooms and all the whispered plans, had come down to this, a house that wasn't afraid of its own shadow, a woman who knew which doors to open and which to keep shut, a boy who believed the sky was a map he could read out loud. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.